Crash the Latverian weapons first.
Alright, welcome back. It's been a long time, and I do mean a long time. Not that this series hasn't been stretched out, and anyway, because this is currently January 7th, 2020, and the last time that I uploaded any of the previously recorded episodes was well before Christmas. So, we're kind of... So we've rescued Miss Marvel, and she's now directing us to all of the little hidden weapons that are located down here in New York. And I've got, I guess, sort of a hybrid team here. This is Iron Man, Spider-Man. So I've got plenty of range coverage. Particularly for range fusion if I need it. I've also got Luke Cage and Wolverine, so that gives me some power. I mean, this is a new Avengers pre-Civil War lineup. I don't know if I'm getting any particular bonuses off of these guys for the moment, but I do like this team as far as having group characters who work together, at least as far as their skill sets are concerned. So in the last set of episodes, we talked a little bit about the rollout of Phase 4. We're still kind of getting, even now in early 2020, with the Black Widow movie trailers being out, we've seen that there's going to be Yelena Belova in that movie. We've seen the Red Guardian. We've seen Taskmaster. Not who Taskmaster is, but that there will be Taskmaster. So that's going on. There's rumors coming out about Thor 4, possibility of Christian Bale being in that movie. Speculation starting to launch, even though we're still a good year or so away from that. So those are some of the things that are different now than when the last time we did this was. But it's also after Christmas, so I hope that you had a happy holiday. If you're not religiously Christian, I hope that you still had an opportunity to hang out with family and friends and do nice stuff. Regardless. And one of the things that I got for Christmas this year, were the DVD versions of Endgame, which obviously came out earlier, and Venom. So I'm pretty much caught up as far as where I would like my superhero movie collection to be. I guess the things I'm missing are things that aren't ultimately very important to me, but it'd be nice to have at some point. I mean, I think that I probably need to complete the Iron Man trilogy in my own personal collection. So that would require me to get Iron Man 2 and 3 at some point. I enjoyed Spider-Man Far From Home, so I'm not going to say that I wouldn't want it to be part of my collection, but I don't know. I mean, the whole fallout from Sony and Marvel kind of trying to figure out the future of Spider-Man and the silliness that went on, during that part, and we all sort of knew where it was going to end up if you knew what the previous arrangement had been and you knew what Disney's demands were. You could kind of draw a middle ground between the two, and you'll end up basically where they ended up with the negotiations over the third Spider-Man MCU movie. But I don't really see a need to put Far From Home at this point in my personal collection. It didn't resonate. I mean, as a film, I enjoyed it, but didn't resonate with me quite the same way that you know, like Thor Ragnarok, resonated with me. I have Spider-Man Homecoming in my personal collection, but I don't. But part of that is because we had a bunch of leftover Toys R Us store credit right as Toys R Us was shutting down a year ago, and so I was picking up a bunch of stuff that they just had available. So I enjoyed Homecoming, the movie. I like this version of Spider-Man. I'm not sure it would necessarily be part of my collection either, considering I could get my Spider-Man fix, you know, from Civil War, and I've got both Infinity War chapters in my collection too. So there's plenty of Peter Parker to go around. I also have Into the Spider-Verse in my personal collection, so you know I'm not missing.
Ever considered surrendering?
I'm not missing the Spider-Man movies. I am interested to see where they go next. You know, I want to know how close we are to the Sinister Six. It's clear that they want to go in that direction, but you know, we've revealed at least 3 members of a potential Sinister Six squad. But do we need 3 more? Can we cheat and have more Mysterio holograms be other members of the Sinister Six, you know, such as they were suggesting with Molten Man, Hydra Man, and Sandman, even though those elemental creatures were not specifically those characters. But, you know, I'm just not necessarily, you know, just that's just not necessarily where I am. But going back to Endgame, one thing that the Marvel movies have done is they sort of entered me into this realm of speculative video, and I don't mean like creating speculative videos, although I've done something of that, but I've never claimed that it was particularly authoritative. Mainly I'm talking about the videos that I've seen that have tried to guess at what will happen, what crazy ideas, you know, people will come up with for the movie. You know, there are still theories that they will somehow resurrect Natasha Romanoff from the dead, which I think would sort of cheapen that sacrifice, so I kind of hope they don't do that. I mean, obviously we still have the issue of 2014 Gamora running around to deal with in the Guardians franchise, or in the MCU as a whole.
Go help the boss get everything ready.
Aha! Boss fight. This is Grim Reaper. He is the brother of Wonder Man. Now, you can tell that this is a second playthrough and not a first playthrough, because if I remember correctly, in a first playthrough, Miss Marvel would actually accompany us through this area, and she clearly did not do that here. So basically, you know, we've got Grim Reaper, who has a period of time where he's basically invulnerable. And so you've got to be careful not to target him during that time. Run around grabbing some health. Also means I need to be on the lookout for doing a team-up move. In this case, a power team-up move, because we're fighting a boss. So you can see him running around like that. He's kind of hard to hit in that situation. Need him to stand around and not move like right there. And I have Spider-Man, I have Luke Cage. Okay, let me take that back. I have Iron Man and I have Luke Cage. And so we were able to pull off a super move against Grim Reaper there. He's currently invulnerable here. But to bounce back into the in-game, there are a lot of speculative theories about in-game, and there are some people who still don't seem to understand what time travel was doing in in-game, and I think to a certain extent you're not supposed to, because time travel is something that's not supposed to work. But, you know, another combination between Luke Cage and Iron Man knocking out Mr. Reaper. Just because time travel is something that's not supposed to work. So, one of the big complaints is, does Steve Rogers create an alternate timeline at the end of the movie? And, of course, there are two different theories about what Steve is doing and how that worked. There's the Russo brothers theory, the directors, who say that Rogers basically spent his life in an alternate timeline, and then came back into our timeline just long enough to gift Sam the shield so that there would still be a Captain America in the MCU timeline. And that's fine. I mean, it opens up an interesting set of possibilities if true. You know, the idea that, you know, Steve could correct a bunch of stuff in the alternate timeline and have no effect on our own, so that he could kind of carve out this world that he would approve of. He could go find Bucky. He could go, you know, and it's going to change the way that events from his perspective would have transpired. But you're never going to see it because it's in an alternate plane. So there's no problem with that. There is the question of, you know, how he gets back, because, you know, clearly we thought Hulk was bringing him back instead of him, but he could, I guess he had one more use of the PIM particles or something like that. And again, this is assuming that he didn't run across more of the things or whatever in the alternate timeline. And so he doesn't come back. The other, yeah, Iron Man can't punch through wood. Keep that in mind. The other thing, the other possibility is that, you know, Steve, the timeline that the main MCU happens in is the timeline where Steve is gone back and he's basically sort of hiding in the background somewhere with Peggy, with the understanding that, you know, if he was to do anything other than that in this timeline, it might screw up the main timeline future. And I think it's important to remember something that the Ancient One, the conversation between the Ancient One and the Hulk about time travel. The Infinity Stones were powerful and important enough that their removal would alter time. Okay, and create new and branching time paths. But Rogers' last act, when he was running around returning the stones, to make sure that all those bad futures, if you want to call them that, but just the futures that didn't have a particular stone at a certain point, you know, Rogers just returned himself. And I think that the argument is that Steve Rogers is not as powerful as one of the Infinity Stones. Does not have the powers of one of the Infinity Stones. Therefore, he cannot wreck the existence of time by anything he does if it doesn't involve a stone. And so that's why I don't think that there's a, that Cap creates a new timeline in his final trip back, regardless of how you look at it. He either goes into an alternate timeline that already existed, where he's in the ice, so who cares? Or he goes back into the early parts of our real timeline. And there's just enough stuff going on, as far as Peggy's dementia and some other things, that could make it work. Obviously, the whole Sharon Carter thing is just a little bit weird if he's actually been her uncle the whole time. But no weirder, I guess, than when when Robert Downey Jr.'s character in the movie The Judge made out with his niece. So, oddly enough, both characters, or at least the actors who have played the two most important heroes. Again, Iron Man can't break wood. We've established this. This is a thing. But, so both characters have made out with their nieces, or both actors have played characters who've made out with their nieces. Even though Tony Stark obviously didn't make out with his non-existent niece, because as far as we know, Tony doesn't have any siblings in this universe. But, we have the ability to clone things. That may change. But we'll talk about that